birth last summer as a gift. I gave her sandwich bags and called it infant wear. So anyhow, on my way back from the Adirondacks, I stopped in Syracuse to visit a friend. And in case you don't know, from my living in Syracuse, I realized it's not a name. It's an acronym that stands for Snows Year Round and Clouds Up. Oh, damn, I screwed that up. Clouds up seemingly every day. There we go. So, but anyway, it was good. It was good to see Syracuse again. And my friend, she's very granola. She's into sustainability, which goes with the theme here. Case in point, I was with her kids and we played that game, rock, recycled paper, scissors. So that was a lot of fun. But it was good. I hung out in the SU campus. That was fun. I was bothering the joggers. You could try this out today since it's so beautiful. Bother the ones that like to stretch out their legs by leaning up against trees like this. And then you just go running up to them. It's like, hey, man, if you just step 2 feet to the left, you could get around that tree. So anyway, getting down to brass tacks. So, yeah, I speak about digital balance. And digital balance is not about throwing away our electronic devices, but digital balance is about throwing away our lives to constant online distraction. And I'm probably the last person to be here talking about digital balance because I was never a tech person. I wasn't an indoor person. The outdoors was always my jam. And this was my love for the outdoors was given to me at a young age from my dad. And my dad was a member of the national, let's see if we could, there we go. My dad was a member, with my dad, my brother, and my dad was a member of the National Ski Patrol. He was a Boy Scout leader. And I was so taken by the outdoors at the age of 3, there he was fascinated by a stick. And my love for the outdoors followed me into my teen years where I lived to live off the land by catching trophy fish. And then it actually followed me.
Jeff, you actually muted yourself.
We back on?
Yep.
Okay. That was my Amish moment. So my love for the outdoors actually influenced me to become a stand-up comedian, believe it or not, because I love the idea of working at night and having my days free to spend it outside, kayaking, backpacking, mountain biking, skiing, whatever. And then when I started to go on the comedy road full time, I realized, man, you've got an incredible amount of free time as a stand-up comedian. Basically, you work 1 hour at night. You might have to do some promo during the day for radio or TV, but otherwise it's wide open. So I began freelance writing for outdoor magazines. And I know some of you are thinking, well, we heard some of your jokes, joke boy. It's probably best you had a fallback position. And so I started to do for outdoor magazines, writing for Rocky Mountain Sports, Explorer's Journal, ESPN's Active.com. It was great. I could work from the road. I could write. It was the perfect job for comedy. And I got some extra income. But then I started to get greedy and I started to write for online sites. And all of a sudden I was online constantly. I had clients all over the world. And then someone told me about this website called dmv.org. It had nothing to do with the outdoors. Yes, it's as boring as it sounds, but it paid incredibly well. And it was the 37th most visited .org site in the world. So I could work 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week if I wanted. And it was great. I could do it before comedy, after comedy, anywhere in the hotel, anywhere on the road, never had to check into an office. It was perfect. Yet I was spending more time online. And I had a friend who says, man, watch it. You're going to become addicted to the screen. I'm like, there's no way, because that's going to happen to me because I'm too much into the outdoors. That only happens to people live in their basement or play video games. It's not going to happen to me, especially where I lived at the end of a dirt road in a thick pine forest at 8,524 feet deep in the Colorado Rockies, which gave me out the door access to world-class skiing, mountain biking, backpacking. It was just incredible. And if anything, my neighbors would not allow me to be stuck on my screen, because any given day, I would have fox on my deck. I'd have mule deer on my deck. I'd have elk staring through my bathroom window, and yeah, that was creepy. I had mountain lions. That's not my house. This is my neighbor's house. Mountain lions coming to visit. And if I could recommend anything today, is spend some time living with mountain lions, because it turns everything in life epic. Cleaning the gutters, washing the windows, taking out the trash feels like an adventure, because you never know if you're going to be attacked. And of course, I had bears. Bears on my deck constantly. If you ever lived with bears, it's like living next to a bunch of drunken fraternity brothers, because they're always just breaking things, waking up in the middle of the night. It's more of a pain than a danger. And when I took this photo, I was standing in my kitchen window and the bear's looking at me. I'm looking at this bear. I'm thinking, oh my God, I picked the worst day to be wearing a salmon-colored shirt. So it was incredible. It was like being in a zoo in reverse. The animals came to me rather than me going to them. And every day felt like a National Geographic special was going to bust out. And plus, I'm heavily into outdoor photography. And I was getting paid by a magazine outside Bozeman up in Montana, was paying me to find humor in the outdoors. Like, case in point, here's proof that trees aren't a photobombing. So I had all this reason to be off my screen, to be outside, outdoors, not spending time, wasting my time on a screen. Yet the internet still managed to rewire my brain. It hijacked my brain. And to be honest with you, it pisses me off that this happened. And if this could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. And that's why I'm talking about digital balance. And the first red flag for me came when all of a sudden I began missing writing deadlines. I never had this problem. But suddenly, if I get an assignment, didn't matter if I had 3 days or 3 weeks, I could not get it in time. And I'd always have to be asking my editors. It's like, man, you got to give me extra time to finish this article. And what it was not because I did not want to write. It was because I lacked the focus. I could not write. I didn't have the mental stamina to sit and write for 3, 4, 5 hours. And my problem was I'd sit at the screen, I'd start to write, and then within 10, 15 minutes, I'm thinking, I should go online. I should check email, do a quick check of email. We all tell ourselves it's going to be a quick check, and that's the problem. It's never a quick check. First off, emails are like zombies. No matter how many you kill off, they just keep on coming back. So they're relentless. And then two, with emails is that you might say a quick check, but then you might have to respond to that email. That takes time. Or else someone will send you a video. Then you're watching a video. Or worse, they send you a link, and next thing you know, you've fallen down that rabbit hole and you're web surfing. And that to me is my biggest problem. Next thing you know, you're wasting 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes. I'm aware of this, and I still struggle with spending web surfing. It was a few months ago, I went online just to check my bank's Saturday morning hours. And it should have taken me 30 seconds, maybe a minute most. 55 minutes later, I'm reading about the bathing habits of South American howler monkeys. I had no idea while I was reading this. And yet by the time I figured it out, I found out my bank had closed. So I just wasted all this time. The next big red flag for me was reading. I used to be a prodigious reader. I could read books for hours. Now I'm lucky if I could go 10 or 15 minutes without being bored, without feeling a need, again, to jump online, to check emails, to check news headlines, sports scores, whatever. Then I started to run out of time for things. I never had time to finish projects. And it was all, again, because I was online wasting so much time. I used to exercise every day. And then I started drop doing that. It would be like, instead of every day, maybe every other day, then maybe once or twice a week, because I was telling myself I did not have time. I wrote a screenplay in LA. It got some heat, had some agencies, some literary agencies contact me. It's like, man, can you write another? We might sign you. No problem. Never wrote it. Again, because I didn't have the time and I didn't have the focus. So, and I just had time for other things. Also, I stopped playing golf. Also, I stopped taking long hikes. It was always a shorter hike because I wanted to get home. I said I had work to do, and I'd get home, and then, of course, I'd jump online and just waste time. I was like a junkie getting a fix. And instead of blaming the internet, I blamed I did not have enough time. I was always telling everyone, I just wish there was more time during the day. And then one day, I came across the following quote. It's from writer Jay Brown, who said, "Don't say you don't have enough time. You have exactly the same number of hours per day that were given to Helen Keller, Pasteur, Michelangelo, Mother Teresa, Leonardo da Vinci, Tom Jefferson, and Albert Einstein."
Jeff, you're muted again.
Yeah, I saw that. And when I first read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so true. It was like an epiphany, like, oh, who am I to say I don't have enough time when you see what they accomplished? But then I started to think of it, it's like, wait a minute, what do these 7 people have in common besides being dead? They did not have online distractions. And if they had social media, if they had electronic devices back then, they would not been as productive. Da Vinci or Michelangelo, he'd been tweeting, "What was I thinking taking the ceiling job? Hashtag Sistine Chapel sucks." Or if they existed during biblical times, there's no way Noah would have built an ark. He would have been too busy taking selfies of himself with koala bears. Or can you imagine if Einstein, if he had it, there's no way he would have. Oh, I got to share this. But if Einstein, he wouldn't have come up with the theory of relativity. He'd been too busy posting goofy photos of himself, distract Truman with a bomb while I steal his bike. I am a genius. Or can you imagine if social media would have existed through the history of mankind, would have been to read all their stupid little comments, would ruin the mystique of all our historical figures. Like Orville and Wilbur Wright, they would have posted something like, "Next door neighbors began a sunbathe topless, must discover way how to see over fence." Or Jesus, he would have tweeted something like, I cannot find a restaurant that seats 13 people. Hashtag Last Supper. So I started to think of all this, and it's like, oh my God, I wish I had my pre-internet life back. I was so much more focused. I could write 3, 4, 5, 6 hours without a problem. But now I can only go 15, 20 minutes if I'm lucky, because all my focus is fractured by the internet. Now, I'm not alone with this. According to research, they said on an average workday, 8-hour workday, the average worker checks their work emails 77 times per day. That's almost 10 times per hour, once every 6 minutes. And research says once we are distracted, it takes us 25 minutes to regain our focus back. So under that context, it's like, man, no wonder I'm going through my days completely distracted. No wonder so many other people are so distracted, not getting work done, because we're constantly checking emails or other online diversions. According to the research firm BaseX, because of email and text distractions, the United States annually loses $650 billion in lost productivity. We're not allowing ourselves to get in that needed deep flow state, zone. You always hear athletes always like, oh man, I was in a zone. I was in a zone that game, because they weren't distracted. They were focused. And that's when we're at our best. And we don't allow ourselves to do that anymore because of our devices. Think of a hobby you have. Think of a passion you have, fishing or painting or playing guitar. You do it for 2 hours, feels like 2 minutes. And that's what being in the zone is. And that's what we're not allowing ourselves to do anymore. And what's frightening about this, I mean, you look at some of the people that, some of the biggest names in sports or entertainment or whatever. I mean, look at LeBron James. Before every playoff series, he goes in the playoffs. He gets off of social media because he understands how important it is to have his focus. And he knows how distracting our devices are. Or Alex Honnold. You guys are in the recreation department. You should know him. If you did not see his movie Free Solo, do yourself a favor. Watch that. He climbed El Capitan in Yosemite as taking this picture here without ropes. It's incredible. But he said before an hour before doing that climb, or a month before doing that climb, he did not use social media. He tried to stay off online as much as possible. Because again, he knew how distracting, how much it would steal time, steal focus. So what's frustrating about all this is that we know the importance of focus is that the tech industry knows exactly what they're doing. Steve Jobs, in an interview with New York Times in 2010, said that he and his wife would not allow their kids to be on iPads because they knew how addictive they were. Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, he and his wife would not let their kids have phones until they were 14. Again, they knew how distractive and addictive they were. And there's a school outside of San Francisco, right near Silicon Valley, where they do not allow phones on campus. 75% of the kids' parents all work in the tech industry. So it's almost as if the tech industry is taking a mantra from the drug industry: don't get high on your supply. They know how addictive their products are. And again, I want to emphasize when I'm saying this, I am not anti-tech. I'll be the first one to admit our devices are phenomenal. They're amazing, but that's the problem. They are too amazing. We cannot take our eyes off our screen. It's like cyber cocaine, and they're all turning us reactive rather than proactive. I mean, see, what happens if we get a text or we get an email right away? Everyone's grabbing their phones. Doesn't matter if you're in conversation with everyone. Doesn't matter if you're in a meeting. It's like we're becoming human versions of Pavlov's dog. They say that on average, 95% of all texts are checked are read within 3 minutes. 90% of all texts are responded to within 90 seconds. So it's almost like distraction had become our new default mode. And what's really frightening about this is our devices do not even have to be on to distract us. The Air Force Academy did a study. They had 3 groups of people. They put them in 3 different rooms. One group had no computers. One group had computers but no access, and the third group had computers with access. They're then given a lesson and then tested afterward to see how well they retain the information. Not surprisingly, the group without any electronic devices scored the highest. But what was surprising was the group that had access to the computers but no access scored just as poorly as the group that had computers with access. I mean, just take examples in your own life. I mean, you go to a movie, someone could be sitting 2-3 rows in front of you with their phones on. Think of how distracting that is. So it's also like our devices are like secondhand pollution, like secondhand smoke or ambient pollution. They don't even have to be ours to distract us. So anyways, with all this in mind, I was like, man, I've got to get a grasp of where my time is going. So I did a time audit, and you could do this. There's a lot of software that allows you to do this now. I did this on my own, and I wanted to see where my time was going over 1 week. And so what I found out, over 1 week, I was averaging per day sleeping 7.5 hours, basic needs, eating, showering, watching Dr. Oz, 2.5 hours, trying to get my dog inside, 15 minutes, trying to get my dog inside without a treat, 3 hours. Normally I do a lot of dog jokes, but I'm right now, limited for exercise when motivated, 1 hour recreation, socializing, 1.5 hours computer time, 11.5 hours. That one freaked me out. I mean, that's like half of my waking day, and it wasn't all consecutive hours. A lot of it was for work, but a lot of it was just wasting time, and it was just all over the course of a day. So that freaked me out. And then I was like, man, what am I doing per hour? I found I was checking emails 4 times per hour, checking social media 6 times per hour, and I was checking social media after submitting a new post 9 times per hour, and then checking news, sports headlines 5 times per hour. So again, put that into context, what I said earlier about how once you're distracted, it takes 20 to 25 minutes to regain full focus. So no wonder I could no longer write. No wonder I was suffering from attention deficit disorder. If I was online that often, checking email, checking social media that often per hour. And the only solace I took from this was that I was not alone. We on average now check our phones 150 times per day. We collectively in the United States, we check our phones 8 billion times per day. In 2008, we spent on average 18 minutes per day on our phones. Today, we spend on average 2 hours, 51 minutes on our phone. Collectively, over 1 year, that equates to 43 days. Think of that. That's a month and a half. That's almost like willfully forfeiting all of July and half of August just to be looking at distractions on our phones. It's crazy. Probably not as crazy as the fact that 67% of adults in the United States now check their online status either in the middle of the night and or during sex. During sex. Can you imagine that? Oh, honey, look at Janet Gunnarsson just posted photos of her new throw pillows. Wow. 57% of women in Great Britain said they would rather give up sex entirely than give up their phones for 1 week. In my home comedy club in Denver, Colorado, the Comedy Works, Dave Chappelle worked with the Comedy Works, and they came up with these nylon pouches where people would put their phones in these nylon pouches. Then it's shut by a magnet. And then if they want to access their phones during the show, they just have to step out of the showroom and they could get access to the phones. And of course, they make exceptions for people in the medical emergency industry. But you would not believe how many people would not go into the showroom for 90 minutes just because they could not have immediate access to their devices. And I'm talking 90 minutes with, a world-class act like Dave Chappelle or John Oliver or Jim Gaffigan, Brian Regan, whatever, and people would still not go in because they could not have constant access with their devices. We now on average spend 2 hours, 22 minutes on social media. Over 1 month, that comes out to 2.25 days. Think of that one. That's like willfully forfeiting an entire weekend and maybe a happy hour on Friday just to be looking at people's cat photos, looking at people's vacation photos, looking at what they had for dinner. They now say that, according to the New York Times, Facebook users spend 39,757 years worth of attention per day on Facebook. I mean, that's attention, again, not given to family, friends, jobs, careers. So it is crazy. And keep in mind, when I'm saying this, these are just statistics from the general population. For the teens and kids, it's off the charts. It's frightening. There's a professor at NYU, Adam Alter, wrote a book called Irresistible. Highly recommend it. It's about screen distraction. And in his book, he describes how he polled a bunch of teenagers, and he gave them the question, would you rather have a bone busted in your hand or give up your phone? 46% of the teens said they'd rather have a bone busted in their hand than give up their phones. And what was shocking about this was the questions they asked to come up with their decisions, like which hand would be broken, or if they gave up their phone, if they broke their hand, could they get their phones back? And then Jean Twenge, she's a professor at the University of San Diego. She studies teen generations. It goes back all the way to the 30s. And she said every teen generation, they're pretty static. They all pretty much the same, except with a little variation, one would come to independence. Yet in 2012, all of a sudden there was this massive spike in teen depression and teen suicide in 2012. And not by coincidence that 2012 is the year that all phones became ubiquitous, when kids thought kids had to have a phone. So it's kind of crazy correlation with that. So with all this said, it's basically instead of seize the day, it's now seize our devices. And unfortunately, it's beginning to affect people's health. Rickets, the lack of sunlight, the lack of vitamin D has quadrupled in the United States in the last 15 years. Again, this is not all because of the phones, but because our devices are creating sedentary lifestyles. People are less apt to be outside. According to the EPA, we now spend 93% of our time indoors. That's just crazy. And that's 87% of that time is spent in buildings, 6% in transportation. So over the course of 1 week, that only averages less than half a day for adults. And for kids today, they're spending over 7 hours per day looking at screens, and yet 7 hours of unstructured free time, or 7 minutes unstructured free time outside. And think of that as a kid, how important it is if you have kids, how important that is a kid for developing their imaginations, unstructured time, not playing soccer, whatever, just picking up a stick or throwing a rock in the lake. Think of when you're a kid, how would you use your imagination? And the kids are not having that today because they're on their screens constantly. 67% of adults are now are overweight or obese. Again, it's not all because of our devices, but it's contributing because it's leading to a sedentary lifestyle. And think of that, when we sit in front of a screen, we're accustomed to eating. I mean, think of that. You sit anywhere. We sit in a movie, we eat. We sit in an airplane, we eat. We sit at a ball game, we eat. What do we do when we tell our dogs we want to give them food? We tell them to sit. We're just accustomed to sitting and eating. So that's contributing to that as well. In 2000, our average attention span for the humans was 12 seconds. Today, it's down to 8 seconds. And to put that in context for you, the average attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. So I don't know what's more frightening. The fact that goldfish have longer attention spans than us, so there's actually people on this planet who are getting paid to measure the attention spans of goldfish. So anyway, so it's kind of crazy. 1 in 4 of American adults are now under some form of psychiatric medication. Not surprising when you think from the moment we get up to the moment we go to bed, we are just bombarded by distractions, bombarded by screens. You can't go anywhere now without screens. Gas pumps have screens. Elevators have screens. They're making refrigerators with screens. There's screens everywhere, so we don't have time just to get outside and just marinate in our own thoughts anymore. They say now 65% of all adults on vacation still check their work emails. And I think it's so crazy that we understand the importance of getting outside, or the importance of rebooting our devices. We're not allowing ourselves to reboot by getting outside, off our devices, and just being in our own thoughts. They say that 56% of all divorces now involve at least one spouse addicted to online porn. And to give you how prevalent this is, in 2017, there's a website called Pornhub. It attracted 28.5 billion visitors in 1 year. That comes out to 800 visits per second. And if you're a parent or a teacher, knowing that this is accessible to kids, that's a bit frightening. And not surprisingly, we're all suffering, and this is my problem, of attention deficit disorder because of our devices. And it's not surprising when you think of right now, we're in an attention-based economy. Distraction is the new currency. It's in the financial interest of Facebook, of all, of social media platforms, of websites to keep us on our looking at the screens. The more time we spent looking at screens, the more clicks we make, the more money they make, the happier their investors. So it's in their financial interest. When you think of it, they basically have, the internet is modeled their business plan after a 3-year-old on Hostess Ding Dongs. A 3-year-old, tugging at your leg going, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's what the internet's business plan is. And they're good at it. They know they do not want us to have lives outside of our screens. They don't want you to work in your garden. They do not want you canoeing. They don't want you skiing. They want us looking at the screens. That's how they make their money. And they're getting very good at it. Take video games, for example. They will hire neuroscientists and behavior psychologists when they're testing out new games. And the kids who are testing out the new games, they hook them up to EKGs and blood pressure devices. And if the game does not spike to 180 to 140, they tweak the game to make it more addictive. Netflix, we're all on Netflix. What do? The auto replay. A show ends, you think, I'll stay up, watch one more show. Next thing you know, it's 4 a.m. because you're just binge watching. And Netflix has done this on purpose. They reduce the friction. And Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, when they asked who his biggest competition is, he said sleep. YouTube, same thing. They do the autoplay. And what's frightening about this is that when we're on these YouTube or Netflix or whatever, they are monitoring everything. It's like they're collecting DNA samples of us so they could build up a profile of knowing how to get us to stay on their devices that much more. They know when we stop. They know when we share. They know when we rewind. They know when we like something. And so they develop that. They get a profile, or they call them algorithms, and so they know how to keep us on. They say that 70%, that we spend almost 1 billion hours per day on YouTube. 70% of that time is spent from recommended videos because they know what you like. And so they'll give you a recommended list. And what's creepy about that, you can test it at home. Watch a video on YouTube with someone in your house on your own separate devices. And then once the video ends, you're each going to get a different recommended list because of the profile they made on you. So they're monitoring everything we do. And then Facebook, what did Facebook do? They went to Las Vegas. They studied slot machines. What was it that made people sit for hours, for days, inside a dark room without windows in the desert and pulling slots? And they found it was a random reward. And so Facebook added the like button. And that's basically our slot machine. That's what keeps people coming back. Because research has found every time you get a like, every time we get a share on Facebook, we get a spike in dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical, and it spikes 400%, the exact same amount of dopamine that a junkie gets when they get a drug fix. So that's why we keep on coming back, and Facebook knew exactly what they're doing. And so what's frightening about this is the Wall Street Journal did a poll. 82% of us rated, or 82% of people said that social media is a waste of time, yet 69% of people went back to it every day. And if you're saying something is a waste of time or you keep on coming back to it, I'm not a psychologist, and that sounds like an addiction. And what's frightening about this, though, is because we're becoming so addicted to shares and likes, is that we're turning all our vacations, all our outdoor experiences into photo shoots for Instagram and Facebook. And so much to the point where people are getting so addicted to it, instead of doing, we're all viewing, we're losing the sense of, we're losing experiences. And people are getting to the point where they're almost accepting the virtual world as more real than the real world. This is a photo taken by Charlie James Hamilton. One second here, where are you? Charlie James Hamilton, he was on assignment for National Geographic in Yellowstone, right? We're working with the great writer, David Quammen. And he said this was more common than uncommon. I mean, the fact that here you got the Tetons right in front, and this guy's taking a picture of the, of the plaque here, and the fact he's got a tripod really freaks me out. But so that's what's happening to us. We're getting more accustomed to two-dimensional than the three-dimensional, and it's getting to the point where our devices are becoming more and more sophisticated, and yet we're dumbing down. Case in point, in 2016, college kids were not submitting their absentee ballots. And what they found out is not because they didn't want to vote, is because they did not know where to buy stamps, where to get stamps. And I know I've been accused of being a dinosaur when I say that, but it's like, man, come on. You can't even solve it. You can't even have the wherewithal to ask where to get a stamp. Home Depot was not getting the millennials into their store. They found out why, because they did not know how to use the tools. And so what Home Depot did is they started to make how-to videos, how to use a hammer, how to use a screwdriver. They even made a video on how to use a tape measure. And when they first did that, they said, oh my gosh, this is going to be too condescending. But they found out, and that made all the difference. Now it's one of the most popular features online of people checking how-to videos on the tools. So we're growing up without experiences. We're viewing instead of doing. And this really hit me last summer in the Adirondacks. I went kayaking at 5 a.m. to catch a sunrise, and I ran into this other kayaker. Her name was Alyssa. And she told me how her friends would not get up to join her, and they joked that they would be able to watch the sunrise via her photos on Instagram at a more convenient hour, 3 hours in the day. And I was thinking about that. It's like, oh my gosh, I was thinking of the writer Robert Pyle. It came up the phrase, the extinction of experiences. And that's what we're going through right now. Because think of it. Say if Alyssa's friends were looking at her photo 3 hours later of sunrise on Instagram. You think a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, they're always going to say, oh my gosh, remember when we looked at her sunrise photos on Instagram? Let's say, for example, they had gotten up in the morning. They would have got all the nuances of the experience. They would have gotten, they would have heard the dipping of paddles in the water. They would have felt the cool morning air, the fog on the water. They would have smelt the scent of pine, and they would have watched the sunrise painting the sun painting the eastern horizon. All the nuances that make up an experience, and that's what we're losing. And experiences are what bond us in life. They're what give us, that's why high school reunions get together 30, 40, 50 years later, is because of the bonding experience. And we're denying ourselves of that because we're viewing so much. And I think of when you look at when they call them cell phones, they call them cell phones for a reason, because that's what they're doing. They're keeping us locked in our comfort zones, because and they say life begins outside our comfort zones, and we're not allowing ourselves to do that, especially, again, the younger generation. If you look at the statistics for teens today, they say it's the safest generation, but they're also delaying adulthood. They're getting their driver's license later. They're getting jobs later. They're leaving home later. They're not dating as much. They're not socializing as much. And according to a stat I just read the other day, for the first time since like 1850, we have the highest demographic of 18 to 34-year-olds living at home. And again, we're all kind of our kids are being in that cocoon or at their phones, their devices, where they're not getting out. So anyway, with all this in mind, with me, what I did one day, I realized, man, I've got to get control of how much time I'm spending on the devices. Our electronic devices are here to stay. So we got to find some kind of balance. And for me, all it took was stepping outside without my device. I started to go walks without my phone. I started to take hikes without my phone. I started to have dinner without my phone. And that made all the difference. At first, the first few weeks, it was difficult. But once I got over it, once I got in the habit of being in the moment, being present without my devices, all of a sudden I found my days a lot more productive. I felt like when people say, it's like, oh my God, you're a bad relationship. Everyone's like, oh my God, you got to break up. You got to break up with that person. And then no, and you finally do. It's like, oh my God, what was I thinking? That's how I felt with my phone. And I think of that line from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, we don't suspect the day to be God's. And all of a sudden I began to realize what he meant by that. My days were so much more productive, so much more fulfilling, where I was able to be present rather than distracted. And I took it farther. I cleaned up. I got off of a lot of social media. And then I even designated one of my rooms in my house as my non-electronic zone, where I go in there just to read or write, and I could get more work done. So it's good. But I still struggle with this. I still struggle with it. It's difficult, especially we need our devices. And these are some tips I could pass on. You can apply, you could use in your own life to try to cut back. And the key is not so much getting rid of your devices, but it's just curbing the compulsion. Add some friction, out of sight, out of mind. And the big one I'd recommend is stop using your phone as an alarm clock. Because what happens when you use your phone as an alarm clock? You get up, you pick up your phone, you turn the alarm clock, and right away it serves as a cue. You're checking email, you're checking text, you're checking news, you're checking sports. 30 seconds into your day, you're being reactive rather than proactive. My sister said she started doing this. It saves her 45 minutes every morning now. She has time to drink coffee, to read the newspaper, and she's not going to work with like her head just in a tizzy. She's actually calm. She says it really has helped her out. Another big one is clean your phone. Remove all your social media devices from your phone. Put them on your home computer. This way it extends the compulsion. Or else if that seems too radical, you can put them in a folder. Again, think out of sight, out of mind. Another simple one, it seems a little obvious, but it actually works, is to grayscale your device. And by that, it means just taking the color off your phone. And it's really easy to do, so it looks like this. Because the brain is attracted to shiny objects. And with having it gray, it dims especially the red notification. So again, it stems the compulsion. And the other one I would really recommend is to do a time audit. Just figure out how much time you're spending on your devices and then gauge what it's taking away from. Case in point, my sister-in-law says, I love Facebook. That's perfect. I'm not telling you or anyone to get off of Facebook or Twitter. Stay on it, but figure out how much time you're spending on it. She said she spends about 2 hours. I'm like, okay, if that's the case, that's 14 hours per week. Think if it's taking away from something else. Do you have a hobby? Do you have something else, a passion of yours that you're not spending time on because you're spending so much time on Facebook? If that's the case, what you want to do is maybe you could, maybe designate one time per day to check your social media, or one day per week, or better yet, trim your Facebook followers. Do you really have to follow the vacations of someone you work with at Dairy Queen from 20 years ago? Maybe just limit it to just friends and family. And probably the biggest one is get outside without your device. Earlier, I said that we all understand the power of rebooting our devices. And what happens when you reboot your device? You turn it back on. It's quick. It's fast. It's like a new device. Yet we don't allow ourselves to do the same. Just get outside without your device and just let your brain reboot. Just take some time off. And if you could do this, take a kid with you. That's the best thing. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems we have today with the kids on our devices. Everyone's telling them, it's like, oh, get off your device, yet we're not giving them an alternative. This is my nephew, Tyler. I took him camping, and he was 11 in this photo, and we were driving up to the Adirondacks, and he was 4. He said last time he was camping, he was only 4, and now he was 11, and he was scared. He would not have any devices. He was going to be bored. What's he going to do? All it took within 2 hours was pitching the tents, paddling out to a lake, and finding a rope swing on this island. And the kid, that was it. It made him open his eyes to the power of the outdoors. And he has returned. He returned the next year with his brother and sister. He returned this past summer with his friends. So it's cool to see. And again, it gave him an experience, something he could carry for life. It wasn't a diversion, and a diversion has no sustaining power. So also, I know that's not going to help with a lot of people, with adults. We can't try to get them outside without their devices saying, oh, you could go on a rope swing. So you got to focus on, to get people outside, recreating, or just getting outside in general, focus on health. I mean, talk to anyone over 40, that's all they talk about is health. And research has found a mere 30 minutes in a forest setting lowers heart rates, blood pressure, reduces stress, boosts immune systems, and improves overall feelings of well-being. And just to get people out to understand this, because I know during some of my shows, I'll have, during my presentations, people say, well, I'm not into the outdoors, or I live in a city. And it's like, that's fine. But everyone has this misnomer that to get the benefits of the outdoors, they have to have skis, they have to be mountain climbing, they have to be kayaking. It's like, when really all it takes to get some of these benefits is just getting outside in an outdoor setting, such as a forest or a meadow. And when people realize it, it makes it that much more accessible. You can do it before work, after work, during lunch break. It just makes it that easier to do. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said, in the woods is perpetual youth. And again, coming back to the reboot idea, this is my dad. He was 89 when this was taken. Look at that Bill Murray-esque smile on his face. He's not thinking how old he is. He's not thinking of emails he has to answer. He's not thinking of news or sports. He's not thinking of cancer that's going to take his life. He's a kid again. He's rejuvenated. And that, in a nut, is the power of the outdoors. So with all this said, these are all suggestions I'm just passing on to everyone. So hopefully they will get you to think. Again, digital balance is not about getting rid of our devices, but it's about not throwing away our lives to just constant online distractions. And hopefully everything I said here will just make you a little bit aware how intrusive our devices have become, and get you to think at the start of the day, do I want to seize my phone, being distractive, being viewing rather than doing, treating life like a cheap approximation? Or do you want to spend it in the moment, being productive, getting things done, feeling kick-ass about life? Or better yet, think about this line from poet Mary Oliver, when she asks, tell me, what is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Do you want to spend it doing, or do you want to spend it doing? Hey, folks, that is my time here. I guess we're going to open up to some questions. Also, I have a PDF with a lot of tips. Wait a minute. I have a PDF with tips. You can email me at jeffwozer@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send that to you. But with that said, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to ask them. If not, good luck with your conference, and thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Max, I'm not seeing anything. Is that we good or?
So no one has any questions. Remember, just go to participants and raise your. Yeah, Jack has a question. Jack, you can unmute yourself. Just go down to the middle and I don't know. Yep.
Should I be seeing anything, Max, or hearing anything, or?
We're trying to get Jack to. Jack, if you go down to the middle where it says start video and you unmute and mute, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, there you go.
I have a comment, Jeff.
Sure, Jack. How you doing?
Good. How are you today? This is a great session that you've done today. I was born in the 1950s, and of course the thing that we were exposed to the most, and I know our parents were very careful about our use of it, was the television. And in the 1870s and 1980s, that was the only real major distraction that we had in terms of technology. And I remember our parents were hassling us about that. And of course, I was lucky. I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. Organized recreation activities were very limited. And of course, we learned to play on our own. So it was a different world. And I'm not saying it was a better one. But it's funny. I've always been one to put my cell phone off to the side constantly. But I'm the only one of my friends that does that. And it's hard, but people don't basically, stop and smell the roses. They really don't. I know it's a very simple cliche, but if you talked about going outside. I've been an avid walker after I was a runner for many years because I couldn't run anymore due to a lot of health problems. But you can walk anywhere. I tell people, if you're in New York City, you can walk. If you're anywhere, you can walk. And you can get outside and you can smell the fresh air. And I recently retired. And when I walk around, what I've noticed is I can pay attention to architecture of buildings. I can listen to birds. And you know what? This is something that I didn't do, even though I walked. And it was just an example of what people are missing, and the joy of the simplicity of life is what's really missing here. I'll give you an example. I love photography, and I used to really be active in it, and especially outdoor photography. And you know what? I gave it up, and I'll tell you why. I would go on vacation, or I would go to the mountains, or even a Yankee game or something, and I was constantly taking pictures of everything. And you know what I noticed? And this even happened on a cross-country trip. After a while, I noticed I wasn't even enjoying the experience. The only thing I was doing was taking pictures. Sure. And I wasn't soaking it up. And now you see these kids with these cell phones, and all they're doing is looking at them, taking pictures, and they're not experiencing it. They're just looking at it or taking a picture of it. There's no experience. There's no soaking in of the simplicity of life. I mean, that's what I see, and it's terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, those are great points, Jack. And I agree with you totally. I mean, kind of going back on some of your statements, when you said you grew up with TV and your parents always saying, you're in front, stop watching TV, stop watching TV. And I've heard this, a lot of people saying, oh, we're just going through a phase like that right now. We'll adapt, we'll adjust. But no. But that's the difference. TV, it was a community thing. You can all sit around, the whole family, watch a TV, and yet we weren't walking out of our homes with a TV in our pocket or the TV on our shoulder. And that's the difference now. Everyone has their devices are just designed for each other. Sherry Turkell, she's a writer. She has a great book. It's called Alone Together. And that's basically what we all are now. We're alone together. But our devices now are designed for addiction. TV was not like that. And in getting to your point about getting outside, if I have more time, I generally touch about that. They just look through the history of mankind of how many creative minds were walkers. Steve Jobs, Darwin, Beethoven, they would all walk, again, to get in the moment. And also, a lot of my speeches, I'll challenge people to every day get outside and try to track down an exclamation point moment. Something simple. It doesn't have to be something big. Just like you said, the chirping of birds or a wildflower or something, just to get you in the moment, just to experience them all in wonder. And again, people think that they have to go to like Alaska or the Yukon to do that. You said you could do it in New York City in Central Park. It doesn't have to be a big size. It could come in small sizes too. So I think that's a great point you brought up.
We have a comment in the chat. It says, any tips to encourage a significant other to get off their phones?
What was that, Matt?
In the chat, it says, any tips to encourage a significant other to get off their phone?
I did see that one come up. That one's tough. They've got to want, again, you've got to, it's leading to a lot of marital problems, leading to family problems, especially with kids. With kids, I can make some suggestions, but if it's a significant other, like a spouse, that one's tough. I don't know how you could, you try to employ something. They have to want to. It's like an addiction. They have to want to get off the devices. So.
Any other questions or just comments that you'd like to share? Just go ahead on.
Great presentation. Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I appreciate those tips. I'm ready to talk to my sister. She's got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So thank you.
Are kids already getting addicted?
No, she's actually taking really good steps. I won't take up the whole time, but she actually just got 6 chickens after taking some courses on how to raise them. And now that's something that they do, and instead of sitting on the iPad and just YouTube.
That's great, because I think that that's the biggest problem with the kids. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I hear at all my presentations: how to get my kids off the screen. And a lot of the biggest problems today is that the kids are saying that their parents are telling them to get off the screens, yet the parents are the first ones.
Yeah.
So they're setting that example, but again, they're not giving the kids alternatives. So the fact of raising chickens, that's a great alternative for the kids.
Yeah, and then the setting limits, she does that as well. So they only have a certain amount. It's a half an hour limit, and then that's it for the day.
Yeah, good for her. I hope she can continue once they become teenagers, though.
Yeah, we'll see. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Sure. You're welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Okay, Max. Take care. Good luck the rest of the conference.
Alrighty, thank you so much for that presentation. It's very inspiring and eye-opening. Thank you for everyone who came, even though you're leaving already. And thank you, Kristen, for having your dog. Very adorable.
You loved it.
For everyone here still, our next title to be here, next session title is Virtual Tours and Tales of Your Park. So just to have a little reference of what's coming next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Have a great conference.
Jeff.